Your history teachers asked me to come in and talk to you a little bit about what it is like being Native American. I'm Mrs. Ellis. My family is from the Tonawanda Seneca Indian Reservation, which is upstate New York. It's part of the Six Nations of Iroquois. I grew up about 15 miles off the reservation, so I didn't grow up on the reservation. But my mom grew up on the reservation until she was a teenager. And I know that you guys have some questions for me. You want to go first?
Okay, so why did your parents choose to not raise you on a reservation, and what hardships did they face?
So I think my parents chose to not raise me on a reservation because it was a better opportunity for me off the reservation for my brother and I. The reservation that I grew up on, or that my mom grew up on, that I'm from, or my family, we say my family's from, is very poor, and there's just a lot of hardships on the reservation. There is some prevalence of maybe more drug and alcohol abuse on the reservation. So I think it was better for them, they thought, to raise us off the reservation away from some of that. Hardships that they faced, I think when my mom was younger and she lived on the reservation, it was a difficult place to grow up. There wasn't a lot there, and it's always had a high poverty level. I think as far as they as a couple, it was an interesting situation because my mom is Native American and my father is white, and I think that there were things they were judged on because my mom married a white man and my father married a woman from the reservation. So I think sometimes that was a little hard for them. And then having kids that are half and trying to figure out like how they'll be accepted on the reservation or not.
Yeah, kind of like what you just said. Have people ever mistaken your race or made any racial assumptions about you?
So what would you guys think? What, if you're looking at me, what do you think I am? White. I look white. I have blue eyes. In the summer, I look a little bit more Native American. I get very dark. So I think that people make mistakes about my race, which is something that's very interesting, and we always want to say, like, you never know what someone's background is, right? So, as far as racial assumptions, there were some things that my mom had told me stories about names that people called her and things that they did to her based upon the fact that she was from the reservation. Because if you grew up near the reservation, you kind of knew it was a poor place to grow up, that, like, again, the poverty level was high. So people used to say things to her. One of the things that she got called a lot because she went to a predominantly white school was they used to call her Dirty Indian. And they used to say mean things to her because she was from the reservation. She didn't grow up with a lot of things, so people made comments to her about maybe not having a lot of things, not having a lot of clothes and like different outfits and things like that. So I think she had a lot of things happen to her when she was younger that she had just told me about.
How much did you learn about Native Americans while growing up, and how did it affect your self-image right now?
So interestingly, I think when we grow up, you don't know that what you're being taught is a cultural difference. Does that make sense? So you think that the holidays that you celebrate or the things that you do, like everyone kind of does that. I didn't know until later that people didn't grow their own food in gardens, which is kind of a cool thing to do now, but it wasn't when I was younger. So my mom always had a huge garden. She did a lot of natural remedies to things, like if you got a burn, you use this plant to take care of it. If you had a headache, you chewed on this. Like it's something that was found in nature. I didn't know that was different until I got to be probably middle school, high school, when I realized that like not everybody's parents do those things. And she always taught me, and this is a very Native American thing, everything's connected. So if you kill that spider, then something else is happening. And there's, she taught me about the food chain and about how we're all connected, including with nature. We used to go hiking a lot, which I didn't realize was kind of not something that everybody did. But she'd show me in the forest like what you could use different things for. Like I remember as a kid going for a walk with my mom in the woods, because we lived near the woods, and looking for puffball mushrooms to make puffball mushroom soup. So like she knew what to look for recipes and things. I don't know if that, so those are some of the things that she taught me. How does it affect me and my self-image now? I'm very much a nature freak still. I love being outside. I try very hard to teach my own son some of these things. It's a little harder to do living near a bigger city. But we do have different things we can do, like go to the Native American Museum in DC, and there's lots of opportunities around here to educate him, even though we don't live close to where my reservation is.
Do you and your family still maintain any Native American tradition today?
So traditions are a little interesting here because a lot of things that happen on the reservation I can't get to. It's 7 hours away. But I try to take advantage of the fact that there are some things that happen. So last weekend there was a fall harvest, so there's different celebrations, almost of seasons. A lot of it surrounds when harvesting is done and when things are planted. So last weekend before, I took my son out to a Harvest Fall Festival powwow so that he could hear some drumming. I love Native American drumming. And so he could see a little bit of maybe the things that my mom had taken me to as a kid. It's a little bit harder here, but you know, we find opportunities. That's the biggest thing.
Where did your parents meet?
So my parents met, absolutely nothing to do with being Native American. My dad used to fix windshields, and my mom broke her windshield, and that's how they met. So not anything to do with being Native American. They knew each other in high school, because my mom did go to the local high school. So they did know each other a little bit, but that's how they met.
When did your mother leave the reservation?
So my mom left the reservation when she was a teenager, probably around 15 or 16 years old. She lived with her extended family growing up on the reservation. So she lived with her grandmother and her grandfather. And my grandmother, so her mother, left the reservation a little earlier and let her live with her grandmother while my grandmother tried to find a place off the reservation to live. When she was financially ready, then her kids came to live with her. So somewhere around 15, 16 is when my mom left the reservation.
What do you know about living on the reservation?
I think living on the reservation was hard. I think it's not the nicest place. It's about, I looked this up right before we came because I couldn't remember how big it was. It's about 9 square miles. It's not that big. I'm from a very small reservation. So the reservations that are out west can be huge, but the one where I'm from is very small. So 9 square miles, there's about 500 or so people that live on the reservation. So I think, it wasn't the nicest place to live. A lot of the land is unusable. So the land, even within that 9 square miles, there's a lot of like marshy swampland that you can't build on. So that's kind of what living on the reservation was like. The Iroquois Nation, the 6 nations of Iroquois, are not teepee Indians. Okay, so that's not something, upstate New York is a little too chilly. So we're longhouse. So there are still longhouses on the reservation. They're typically used for meeting places. They do, education classes, teaching the little kids how to speak the native language. So there are longhouses on the reservation. There's a second. Do you want me to keep going through these questions too?
Like education?
Sure.
Okay. So the question was about what is education like on the reservation. So they do not have their own school system. Again, it's really small, so there aren't enough people to make up a school. So the students from the reservation go to another local public school. So they take a bus just like anyone, and the bus picks them up and takes them to the local school. It's a predominantly white school still to this day, so the kids from the reservation might look a little bit different than most of the kids there. The government system, so the question was what kind of government system is there? It is a matriarchal type of system on our reservation, which means that the women hold the power. Okay, so there's a council of women. They select the chief, or they remove the chief. Okay, the chief makes a lot of decisions, but the women are the ones who have the power to choose or remove the chief. So that's kind of the way that the council is set up. Healthcare on the reservation, there is a healthcare building, and everything is located in one building. It's kind of neat. Your doctor's in the same building as your dentist, as your I think there's someone there for eye doctor. So everything's in one building. It's a government program where students that are becoming doctors or dentists or whatever their specialty is, they get scholarships and they have to give back time. So everybody that's a doctor on the reservation is working for that reservation because they were given some sort of a scholarship and they have to kind of give back some time. But it's very small. I went there all the way through college that, you could make you could have one day and just go to all your different doctors, which is kind of cool. What kind of jobs do people have? Everyone has different, it's just like here. There's, people go to all sorts of different jobs. What I will say is people on the reservation typically have a high school degree, but not a lot of people go to college. My brother and I are 8 years apart, so he went to college for 4 years, and then I went to college for 4 years. For 8 years, we were the only two people from the reservation, two registered Native Americans that went to college. So there isn't a culture of going on to college.
Did you eat your culture's food or food like pizza and hamburgers?
So we ate just like everybody else eats. I think that the cultural food is when you go to festivals or when there's like some sort of holiday. That's where you would eat that type of food.
Did you ever wear your native clothing?
No, I don't have any native clothing, but I do have my mom's dress. My mom has a dress that was made for her. So I have that now. I have some beads that have been in our family for a long period of time that we never really touch or take out. They're in a safe deposit box at the bank so that nothing will happen to them. But they've been in our family for a while.
What did you do for fun on the reservation?
So my mom would take me to the reservation for, again, like traditional events. Other than that, it was, to see family. So it's just kind of like going to see your grandparents and hanging out with your family, cousins, and things like that.
What was the major difference between living in a city and on a reservation?
So I think the opportunities near a city are better. On the reservation, there's like one small grocery store on my reservation. So like living off just made things easier. Easier to get in the car, go to the grocery store, easier to get things. But they're not that far away. It's just a little bit out of the way. So I think that's the biggest thing, and again, it was just opportunity that my parents thought would be good for me to have off the reservation.
Do you think people wearing a feather in their hair or dressing up as Native Americans is offensive? What about the Redskins?
So is it offensive? I think if you do something nicely, I don't mind if people dress up like a Native American. It doesn't really bother me as long as it's done in a nice way. as long as it's not done to be offensive. And how do I feel about the Redskins? This is huge. It's a big question around here, right? Around DC. I don't like the word. I think it's a very offensive word. My son happens to like Washington, and that's how we refer to it in our house. They are the Washington football team. They are not the Redskins in our house. We have tried to teach him about that word, and I don't really like it. It kind of causes like a bad reaction in me. But I also try not to let it get to me because, in the end, I know someone's not trying to be offensive, but it is an offensive word. So we've tried to tell our son like what it means, not necessarily so he'll get mad at someone and get upset, but so that he understands like why that word causes some feelings in people. I don't think I would ever have my son wear a Washington Redskins sweatshirt if I went home to the reservation. And I do know that like my brother gets very upset that we even let him like the Washington Redskins. So it means different things. Now, the thing with Native Americans too is if I tell you that a lot of reservations are poor and they don't have a lot, then is it really the most important thing on their list, right? Is it the most important thing that they think of? If somebody says, do you care about the Washington Redskins name, like the Redskins? I think a lot of them have a lot of other worries, right? So, there's a lot of poverty. I think it's not necessarily the top of the list of things that are that they're worried about.
Do you feel like people treat you differently because you are 50% Native American? What about other Native Americans?
So it's interesting because I look white. We've already established that, right? Yeah. But the face of Native Americans is changing because there aren't a lot of Native Americans. And so Native Americans are going to look like me. So it's interesting, though, when I tell someone I'm Native American, first they don't believe me. Or they think I'm like this much. But then they ask some crazy questions. Like there's always some very typical, did you grow up in a teepee? No, I didn't grow up in a teepee. There's just some things that people kind of go to those stereotypical Native Americans, like what we think they are. So I think it's just more about how are you Native American? Like, what do you teach people about what it means like to be Native American? What does it look like to be Native American? My niece's name, my brother's daughter's name is Seneca because I'm Seneca, part of the Iroquois, and I think that's pretty neat. I think has anyone ever heard that name before? Seneca as a first name? Yeah? Okay. So I think it's interesting because I was like, wow, you named her Seneca, but there's like 6 Senecas from a reservation. So it's a pretty common name on the reservation. But I think it's interesting because people will ask her about her name and then she gets to tell the story about how she got it. I don't know, did that answer the question? Anything else you guys want to know? No.
Thank you very much, Miss Ellis. Thank you for coming. Thank you. We appreciate it.